Europe in 1346 was a crowded, struggling continent. Famine had ravaged the land for decades. War was constant. Cities were filthy, tightly packed, and unprepared. No one knew that the worst catastrophe in human history was sailing toward them. The bacterium Yersinia pestis had existed for millennia, living in the rodent populations of the Central Asian steppes. In 1338, tombstone inscriptions near Lake Issyk-Kul record mass death. Something had disturbed the reservoir. The plague had woken up. Mongol forces besieged the Genoese trading port of Kaffa on the Black Sea. When plague broke out in their own army, the Mongols turned it into a weapon. They catapulted infected corpses over the city walls. The survivors fled by sea, taking the plague with them. 12 Genoese trading ships left the Black Sea port of Kaffa. Most sailors aboard were already dead. Those still living were covered in black, festering boils. They crossed the Mediterranean, carrying their invisible cargo. When they arrived at the port of Messina, Sicily, Europe's fate was sealed. 12 ships docked at Messina harbor. The port workers were horrified. The sailors were either dead or dying, their bodies covered in black, pus-filled swellings the size of an egg. The Messina authorities ordered the ships expelled immediately, but the rats had already left the ships. There were 3 forms. Bubonic, the most common, attacked the lymph nodes, buboes. Swellings the size of an apple in the armpit, neck and groin, black, bleeding, agonizing. Septicemic plague turned the skin black as blood poisoning took hold. Pneumonic plague was the most terrifying, spread through the air alone. No one survived. From Messina, the plague moved with terrifying speed. By January 1348, it had reached the great cities of northern Italy. Florence was hit hardest. The chronicler Boccaccio watched his city die. 3 out of every 5 Florentines would be dead within months. Doctors who visited patients in the morning were themselves buried by nightfall. The greatest trading civilization of the medieval world was collapsing. Giovanni Boccaccio survived the plague in Florence and wrote about what he witnessed. Bodies piled in the streets, families abandoned the dying, society's rules dissolved. People sealed themselves in their homes and refused contact with others. Others threw themselves into wild feasting and debauchery, reasoning they were already dead. His Decameron, 100 tales told by survivors hiding from plague, became one of literature's masterpieces. By the spring of 1348, the plague had crossed the Alps into France. Avignon, seat of the papacy, was struck with devastating force. Pope Clement VI fled to his private chambers, surrounded by fires to purify the air. In Paris, 800 people were dying every single day. The physicians of Paris blamed a conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars for the catastrophe. In June 1348, the plague arrived at the English port of Melcombe Regis in Dorset. Within months, it had engulfed Bristol, a city so devastated the living could barely bury the dead. By the winter, London was in the grip of the pestilence. Parliament was cancelled. Courts ceased to function. The king's own daughter, Joan, died of plague in Bordeaux. Approximately half of England's population, 2 to 2.5 million people, would be dead within 2 years. Watch as the Black Death sweeps across Europe, country by country, city by city. In just 6 years, it would travel from the Black Sea to the Arctic Circle. No natural barrier stopped it. No army could fight it. No prayer could turn it away. By 1353, 1 in 3 Europeans was dead. Between 1347 and 1353, the Black Death killed between 30 and 60% of Europe's entire population. In 6 years, somewhere between 25 and 50 million Europeans died. In some regions, parts of Italy, France, England, the death rate exceeded 60%. Whole villages were simply erased. Forests reclaimed farmland that would not be tilled for generations. Europe's population would not recover to its pre-plague level for another 200 years. The Church offered an explanation. The plague was God's punishment for humanity's sins. Priests heard final confessions and died. Nuns nursed the sick and died. The Church lost perhaps 40% of its clergy. An entire generation of priests wiped out. When prayer failed to stop the dying, the faithful began to ask questions the Church could not answer. The authority of the Church, already strained, would never fully recover. As the Church failed, desperate people turned to radical acts of penance. Groups of flagellants marched through towns, publicly whipping themselves bloody. They believed their suffering would appease an angry God and stop the plague. The Pope condemned them. The plague continued regardless. With no scientific explanation for the plague, people needed someone to blame. Rumors spread that Jews had poisoned the wells. Entire Jewish communities were massacred. In Strasbourg, 900 Jews were burned alive before the plague had even arrived in the city. Pope Clement VI issued papal bulls protecting the Jews, but few listened. The plague shattered every social bond. Family members abandoned the dying. Doctors charged fortunes and still could do nothing. Many simply refused to see patients. Cities hired carters, known as Becca-Morti, to collect bodies from the streets before dawn. The smell of death hung over every city. Bells rang constantly for the dead. Normal life, markets, courts, schools, harvests, simply stopped. The ordinary churchyard was useless. There were simply too many bodies. Cities dug mass pits, trenches filled layer upon layer with the dead. In Avignon, the Pope consecrated the Rhône River so that bodies thrown into it would receive a proper burial. Medieval Europe had never conceived of death at this scale. It had no language for it. Medieval doctors believed in the miasma theory, that bad air caused disease. Treatment involved bloodletting, purging, applying hot poultices to the buboes, and prayer. The beak-nosed plague doctor's mask, filled with herbs and spices, was meant to filter miasma. Not one of these treatments helped. Germ theory was still 500 years away. By 1353, the first major wave of the Black Death had run its course, but it never truly left. The plague returned in waves for the next 3 centuries. Major outbreaks struck again in 1361, 1369, 1374, 1390, each time killing tens of thousands. The last major outbreak in Western Europe, the Great Plague of Marseille, killed 50,000 in 1720, but nothing ever matched the catastrophic scale of 1347 to 1353. With 1/3 of the population gone, the survivors found themselves in a different world. Land was abundant, labor was scarce. Peasants could now demand wages or simply leave for better terms. The feudal system that had defined Europe for centuries began to crack. The Black Death didn't just kill people, it killed a way of life. From the ashes of the Black Death grew one of history's most remarkable cultural explosions. Survivors no longer trusted the Church's promise of eternal reward. They wanted meaning in the here and now. Humanism was born. A new focus on the individual, on earthly life, on human potential. Artists like Giotto, who survived the plague, began painting with new emotional realism. The Renaissance, the scientific revolution, the Reformation, all have roots in the plague years. The word quarantine comes from the Italian quarantina, 40 days. Venice in 1377 became the first city to systematically isolate travelers to prevent disease, the first public health policy. The plague forced Europe to develop new institutions, hospitals, public health boards, vital records. Modern medicine, modern government, and modern society were all, in part, forged in the furnace of the Black Death. The Black Death was not a unique catastrophe. It was a warning. Throughout human history, disease has repeatedly reshaped civilization. Smallpox, cholera, the 1918 flu, HIV, COVID-19. Each pandemic tests the same things: our science, our institutions, our solidarity, and our humanity. The medieval world failed those tests in spectacular and brutal ways. We have the knowledge they lacked. The question is whether we have the will. 50 million people. Some estimates say more. Not statistics. People, fathers, mothers, children, farmers, monks, kings. They had names. They had fears. They had no idea what was happening or why. The least we can do is remember them.